Our discussion today centers on what is maybe the most agonizing stage of the advanced language journey, the C1 plateau. It's that place where learners are functional, often quite eloquent, but they still feel this frustrating gulf between them and a native speaker.
Exactly. It's where all the quick, measurable wins of the beginner phase have just vanished, and progress seems to slow to a crawl. You feel trapped, really, between competency and, well, true mastery. So the challenge is figuring out the precise catalyst needed to break through that barrier.
Absolutely. And so we're debating a really fundamental shift in approach. The question is this: does the key to native-like fluency lie in a radical shift to living in the target language? Integrating it fully into your identity? Or does the continued conscious effort of let's call it the acquisition model, remain necessary to build that final layer of precision? I'm going to argue that this profound shift from learning to living is the breakthrough.
And I'll present the counter-argument. While that living mentality is of course motivating and necessary for applying the language, I maintain that the conscious acquisition model provides the essential structure and foundational precision you need for true mastery. It ensures you don't just have these structural gaps hidden under a nice veneer of cultural comfort.
Okay, so my core thesis is that the C1 learner is stuck precisely because they're still treating English as an external skill to be acquired. There's a psychological barrier where using English feels like a performance. The only path forward is to completely dismantle that. We have to move from acquisition, which is, setting aside English time, to full integration, weaving English into your identity, your hobbies, your routines. That's the only way to go from knowing the rules to actually embodying the language.
That framing is compelling. The idea of language as an identity tool, but I'm not convinced that it should minimize what I'd call the mental filing cabinet. For me, acquisition is that methodical process of organizing your vocabulary, refining complex grammar. If you shift entirely to just living it, you're basically relying on, accidental exposure to fill in gaps that really should be addressed intentionally.
Grossed in a novel or navigating a professional task in English, they enter a state of flow. And this state is critical because it activates deeper, more intuitive parts of the brain. It bypasses the analytical filter of the prefrontal cortex, which is, frankly, the choke point for so many advanced learners. This allows the brain to forge stronger, faster neural pathways so the learner can begin to feel the language, much like a native speaker. And the first step, the most symbolic step in this whole process, is abolishing the artificial idea of English time.
I see the appeal of that intuitive flow state. I do. It mirrors how native speakers operate. But let me offer a different perspective on how you get there. While intuition is the goal, that intuition has to be built on a robust, consciously acquired foundation. If we just abandon conscious effort, targeted grammar study, intentional vocabulary building, we risk neglecting the very precision and analytical understanding that high-level discourse demands. You can't intuitively access a concept or a structure you've never consciously stored in the first place.
But that's exactly where the traditional model fails the advanced learner. They've already collected most of the rules, yet they're still slow. It's like consciously trying to calculate the physics of riding a bicycle while you're on it. At some point, that conscious calculation has to give way to muscle memory, to intuition.
And yet, how did you learn to ride that bicycle? You needed conscious, analytical effort. Probably a few painful, very deliberate lessons to get the balance right. The acquisition model, gathering new words and rules, is essential for ensuring that robust, generalized proficiency. The living model relies heavily on inferring meaning from context, which is great for speed, I'll grant you that. But it's structured learning that allows a learner to move beyond simple function to true conceptual clarity, the ability to articulate abstract ideas, to engage in a precise debate. That conscious structure is what ensures the spontaneity you're after is actually sound.
Okay, so let's talk about the nature of the effort then. Because if the traditional approach isn't working at this level, the problem has to be in how the effort is being applied. Integration is effective because it forces the brain to adapt more holistically. Think about the entertainment overhaul, like the no dubs, no subs challenge. It forces the brain to infer meaning from context, from visual cues, from intonation, which creates far more robust memory links than just reading a translation.
I agree that that kind of intense processing is fantastic training. For speed, definitely. But let's look at what that effort actually generates. Take Annika, the designer you mentioned. She found her breakthrough binge-watching sitcoms. What did she master? She mastered the social glue, sarcasm, informal rapport, cultural nuance. And that is absolutely vital, I agree, but it is not the same thing as mastering the rhetorical devices for a professional pitch.
I would argue that mastering the language as people actually use it is far more valuable than mastering the language as it's written in a textbook. Anika's confidence, built from understanding authentic interaction, is what allowed her to participate more freely, which in turn accelerated her acquisition of formal language when she needed it.
But true intellectual output, professional clarity, analytical precision, that requires operating from the analytical prefrontal cortex as well, not just the emotional intuitive centers. The two have to work together, and your own case studies hint at this. Kenji, the engineer, he needed more than just casual fluency. His breakthrough wasn't watching sitcoms, it was a high-stakes academic environment, a project management course on Coursera. That demanded reading complex technical material and participating in structured discussion forums.
But Kenji was still using English as a vehicle for a passion engineering. He wasn't treating it as the object of study. His focus was on the project management concepts, and English just became the tool, the transparent window. The learning of the English terminology it was just-in-time learning, driven by the immediate need to pass the course.
I have to challenge that premise. The effort involved in a formal certification course can't be called passive integration. It requires deep, deliberate, analytical study of complex texts. That is the very definition of conscious acquisition at an advanced level. We can't confuse a passion for the subject with the rigorous analytical demand that subject imposes on the language. Kenji was forced to analyze syntax and terminology to convey precise information. That's structural mastery, not accidental flow.
So you're basically arguing that even at C1, we have to maintain a formal curriculum-based approach?
A targeted and high-level analytical approach. Yes, absolutely. And this whole focus on niche passions brings us to a major concern I have about vocabulary, which is the difference between depth and breadth. Creating an English life ecosystem based only on personal passions risks generating a vocabulary that's highly technical, but also extremely narrow.
That's a fair point, but I would frame the result very differently. It's about the quality of the usage, not just the quantity of words.
Well, let's look at Alessandro, the coffee roaster. His integration was incredibly successful in his domain. He mastered terms like bright acidity, mouthfeel, channeling, but he explicitly says he wasn't learning general academic words like ubiquitous or paradigm. So if the ultimate goal is comprehensive fluency, the ability to do a job interview or give a presentation on climate change, is that niche depth really adequate?
I would say that depth of usable, authentic vocabulary is far superior to shallow breadth from just-in-case learning, memorizing word lists you might never use. The integration strategy naturally focuses on just-in-time learning. You look up a word only when it's crucial for understanding something you care about. That kind of contextual learning is so much more efficient and psychologically sticky than rote memorization.
I agree that context aids retention, of course. But the challenge is when that context is missing. If Alessandro needs to write a formal letter about zoning regulations, a context totally unrelated to coffee, his deep knowledge of channeling doesn't help him. The acquisition model ensures that before you specialize, you've acquired the robust, generalized vocabulary needed for universal communication.
But the confidence and competence he gained from mastering that specialized domain, from speaking coffee with authority, that spills over. He's no longer crippled by the anxiety of trying to be perfect. He's proven to himself he can master a complex topic in English, and that psychological victory makes all other contexts feel less daunting.
Confidence is the mechanism for using the competence you already have, but it is not a replacement for structural integrity. I worry the pure integration model encourages the C1 learner to mistake fluency and their passion for general linguistic precision.
Okay, but let's talk about the practical side of this.
Because integration is often dismissed as, oh, you have to move abroad. It doesn't. It just requires intentionality. Simple steps like the digital metamorphosis, changing your phone and computer language, expose you to high-frequency practical vocabulary 24/7 without any conscious study. English stops being a subject and becomes your environment.
The digital metamorphosis is brilliant for embedding words like search or notifications. I'm completely on board with that. My serious concern, however, is about sustainability. Specifically, the fatigue factor.
Well, the goal is exposure, not exhaustion. The environment is curated based on what you already love. If you're watching something you're passionate about, the cognitive load is just inherently lower.
But processing a foreign language, especially trying to infer nuance like the no dubs, no subs challenge demands, is undeniably cognitively demanding. The source material itself acknowledges this. And while the suggestion is to watch a dumb comedy when you're tired, that still requires active mental effort in a foreign tongue. There's no real cognitive break.
But by letting English be the vehicle for relaxation, the effort shifts from analytical labor to effortless consumption. The C1 learner needs to stop equating progress with pain.
The total abolition of a native language, which is often what's implied by abolishing English time, ignores a crucial human need for cognitive quiet, for linguistic retreat. If you push yourself into pure 24/7 immersion too quickly, you risk burnout and you might abandon the whole thing. The path has to be sustainable. We have to allow for moments of recuperation in our native tongue.
In summary, my position is that the critical step for advanced learners at that C1 barrier is realizing that English must become the vehicle for their life, the means to pursue passions, work, relationships, not just the object of study. This fosters intuitive fluency and ultimately unlocks a richer, more connected life by allowing them to fully inhabit their multilingual self.
And while I agree that applying English as a vehicle is vital for confidence and social fluency, the learner must not discard the value of conscious effort and structure. The acquisition model builds the necessary linguistic architecture, ensuring precision and clarity. The integration model can then build speed and intuition, but it has to be on top of a solid, consciously constructed base that prevents ambiguity and structural error.
It seems we agree that both intuitive flow and structural precision are necessary, but we fundamentally disagree on the primary catalyst for that final breakthrough, whether it's the intuitive liberation of living the language
or the analytical refinement of consciously acquiring it. Indeed. We've explored two very distinct pathways for overcoming the C1 plateau.
So the choice for the listener really lies in determining whether their current barrier is structural, a lack of analytical competence, or if it's psychological, a hesitation to fully inhabit the language and embrace that intuitive self.